Uh, yeah, so ready.
Yes, over to you, Terry. You've got 10 minutes, and if there's any time left for the end of your 10 minutes, we might be able to ask questions.
I'm actually just about to board a flight, so I have about 3 minutes. Thank you, though. I'll talk fast. I'll talk real fast. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I just wanted to say I've been council adjacent for quite a long time now, so I don't have great hope of having any impact. But as I own Queenstown Lakes Community Facebook group with 7,000 people, I think I have a fair understanding of what the appetite is in the town. We feel like there's a kind of double dipping going on where when I asked for what the fees are for previously for the dog registration fees, a lot of it was kind of council overheads. So it feels like there's a user pays twice thing goes on. Costs keep on going up and services don't go up. Really basic things like having bins around the place makes it nicer for everybody, having dogs in the town, having safe places to leave your animals like outside the gym or outside the library, you know, any kind of other council locations. So there's no increased service for continuing increased costs on the dog front. Don't even start me on dogs on buses, although I know that's ORC. And there's just a general sense that we are subsidising councils spend where there's a lot of wealth in this district that could be coming from somewhere else, and definitely no service when you've got to run 5Ks with a steaming turd in a plastic bag because there's nowhere to put it. Okay.
Thank you. Any questions for Terry while she's still available?
That's right, Jerry. It was a wee bit hard to hear some of that. That was all good. I think we've got your written submission. Basically, you're saying the fees are going up, but you don't see the great increase or improvement in service. Is that what you're saying?
No, 100%. And we've got a community that's really keen to engage and could actually, you know, if there's a lost dog, it usually doesn't go through council, it goes through my Facebook group. You know, people generally are trying, really are a good community of really responsible people, and we don't see any value for the students.
Thanks, Terry. I noted in your written submission too the feedback around creating more dog-friendly spaces and things like hitching posts and water bowls and disposal points for rubbish. So thanks for making those. But I can see you packing up and getting ready to run. So just know that we've heard you and cheers for your input.
I appreciate it. And I did actually have one more thing about the rec centre as well. You know, me and my 17-year-old son go to the gym together. I don't think there's many other things in this town that are as important as having a place where entire families can go and do healthy things for a low price. So rec centre as well needs to stay accessible, especially for the kids.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.
Right. We've got a schedule now.
Yeah.
Already. So is Harriet Jock here?
Yes.
Or she online as well?
She's online.
Okay, sorry. Harriet, so you've got 10 minutes, a 10-minute slot, and if there's any time at the left, any time left at the end, we might be able to ask some questions. Do you have any? So over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for letting us speak, Federated Farmers Otago, speak to their submission on the fees and charges. I definitely won't take all of the 10 minutes, but here we go. So we had 2 points to our submission. The first was around the increased fee for working dogs. So, and just bearing in mind that the neighbouring council, QLDC, charges $12 per working dog, I guess we just queried whether the increase in QLDC from $105 to $115 per working dog had been through an adequate cost benefit assessment. I guess we're fairly confident that the costs associated with dogs aren't related to working dogs. And then the second part of our submission, which is really why we wanted to talk today, because we thought it was a really good proposal by QLDC, is the proposal to cap the number of working dogs at 2 working dogs per owner. So that is something that we would strongly support. a lot of the farmers with a team of dogs are young shepherds, and they don't necessarily have the means to pay the costs associated with registration. They're on or they have like generous packages, but like the income cash in hand, I guess, isn't as high as other industries. So yeah, thank you for putting that proposal forward, and that is something that Federated Farmers supports.
Great. Very good, thank you. Anyone, any questions for Harriet? Thanks,
Harriet. I don't quite know which way I'm looking to look at you. I'm curious as to rates around other districts. You've given us the example of our neighbours at 12. Do you have any other indications of, and I think one of your other suggestions, or was it maybe from another submitter, around the challenge of registering individual dogs in the system when you're talking more about teams? Is there any suggested input or thoughts around either of those questions?
So the first one is, so I'm mostly familiar with QLDC, but I know that we recently also submitted on Tasman where there was a proposal to increase working dog fees to $50, and there was a very large outcry. So QLDC is out of, I guess, that linear, whatever that curve is. They're an outlier in terms of how much they charge for their working dog registration. Registering a team of dogs would be clever. So like working dogs, you have a larger number than pet dogs, for instance. So you have greater turnover. So yeah, that would really be for the council to decide. There would be merit in it because you'll always have a consistent number in your team, but there is just that larger turnover than if you had a pet dog, for instance. Yeah. And particularly if you're capping it too, you could just have, that would make a lot of sense. So whoever submitted that, it sounds like a good idea.
Thank you for your comments on that.
That's an interesting point. We might get some advice from staff on this, but if you've got a whole team of dogs, and it could change throughout the year anyway, having worked with teams of dogs, it's an interesting concept of which dog are you actually registering. If you're capped with 2, or you're just picking a dollar amount of the service, I guess.
Yeah, that's right.
So I don't know how, I haven't worked on a farm for a long time, but not sure how the young shepherd or musterers handle that with a big team of dogs.
They will just register them when the notice comes out. So it'll be like they have to name the dogs when the notice comes out at the moment. But if you're changing to having a cap of 2, then you could just have a team of 5 dogs, for instance, rather than naming the individual dogs.
Okay, thank you.
You may not know, and it might be a question we ask staff later on, but feasibly all the dogs are registered, you just pay for 2. But yeah, anyway, do you know with those examples that you gave us in other districts, do they have a limit on the number, or do they pay for every dog?
No, that's why we've commended QLDC for putting a limit on.
Very good.
Yeah.
Okay, no other questions? No, thank you. Very good. All you thank you very much for your submission, and yeah.
Thank you very much for having me today. Okay, have a good day.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
So next one is Pete Spencer Bauer. Steve. Yep. Oh, good. Happy to go a little bit earlier than scheduled.
Morning all, good to have me here today. My name's Pete Spencer. I'm the CEO and Director of Wanaka Helicopters Group based at Wanaka Airport. Wanaka Helicopters was founded at Wanaka Airport in 1998 by my father and mother, Simon and Carolyn Spencer Bauer. And I've worked there full time since 2010. We're the largest helicopter flight training school in Australasia. We conduct scenic, commercial and search and rescue and transport passengers, thousands of them every year. We currently employ a staff of around 20 full-time equivalent and have 50 enrolled students with us learning to fly. We also own and operate Learn to Fly New Zealand, which is a fixed-wing flight training school also based at the airport with four full-time staff and 20 enrolled students. We're deeply concerned that the proposed changes for the fee structure at Wānaka Airport. This will disproportionately impact operators like ourselves who provide flight training and educational services. Our fixed-wing company Learn to Fly operates 3 aircraft which will park on the grass apron area. Based upon current operations, the proposed grass apron parking fee would equate to an extra annual cost of $10,950, including GST. This is a significant and unsustainable burden for a community-focused training initiative. The proposed grass apron parking fee equates to a charge of almost 10 times more per square metre than the current rent charged by Wānaka Airport for existing buildings. We proudly operate the largest flight training school in Australasia, registered with the New Zealand Qualifications Authority as a private training establishment, and our mission is to train the best and safest pilots in the world. Sadly, we're one of the last remaining helicopter flight training schools in New Zealand. These are closing down all around the country due to the rising costs and increasing regulatory requirements. Flight training is not highly profitable. Our primary service is to the community and training the next generation of well-trained and safer pilots. Unfortunately, the importance of the aviation industry in New Zealand is often overlooked as these proposed increases at Wānaka Airport showcase. Aviation is critical to us, to the world and to our remote region, and is fundamental to our country's economic and social success. The Wānaka Helicopters Group proudly plays a critical role in the national global aviation sector by training the next generation of pilots, who will be the pilots that will one day bring service back to this community. Whether that's through tourism, transportation, search and rescue, or the many other varied operations that aviation performs. Our past students are now contributing to connecting communities around the world, including the Queenstown Lakes District. A blanket increase of the landing fees include a massive 23% increase for our training aircraft, and the introduction of the grass apron charge fails to take into account the different nature of frequent training flights compared to commercial or occasional use. Unlike commercial scenic operations, each training flight is not scalable. Each student requires individual one-on-one training and over 150 hours of flight in an aircraft at a high cost. Our training contributes to the long-term growth of the aviation sector in the country, and these costs will ultimately be a partner for our students, or it were to contribute to the demise of one of the largest and oldest helicopter flight training schools in the country. I'm confident that the intention of the Queenstown Lakes District Council and Queenstown Airport Council is not to punish, stifle or disadvantage students of aviation. However, these fees directly target our training school and to all our students who are already struggling with rising costs of living in our region, inflation and significant student loans. Ultimately, the proposed fee increases and further uncertainty to our business, ultimately these proposed fee increases add further uncertainty to our business. We've actively been trying to expand our facilities for over 7 years. Having received building and resource consent for these expansions, we're unable to proceed due to the uncertainty around our leases, specifically the tenure and the terms for lease expiry. It feels that Queenstown Airport Corporation is deliberately sabotaging businesses that operate at Wānaka Airport by requiring operators to agree to non-commercially viable lease terms. Queenstown Airport Corp was at one stage granted a 99-year lease on the airport from Queenstown Lakes District Council. Yet, Queenstown Lakes District Council, your tenants are struggling to secure a tenure of more than 5 years. Queenstown Airport Corporation's response to the short-term leases is to utilise relocatable structures for any future developments. Accepting this recommendation would require us to provide over more than $200,000 worth of costs having already spent developing plans and specifications for redeveloping our site. Do we want to see Wanaka Airport covered with protocols? In the last 10 years, I've had to deal with countless different Queenstown Lakes District Council and Queenstown Airport Corporation property managers, all of whom have had zero consistency and have had differing ideas on lease terms. We have more meetings than I've had hot dinners, but I continue to feel disheartened and frustrated by the terms that come back to us. These increases can only be driven by poor performance of the airport due to significant overhead costs associated with management of the airport. The biggest mistake Queenstown Lakes District Council has done is let Queenstown Airport Corp manage Wanaka Airport. The airport is not at all similar to the operation located here at Frankton. The large, inflated team of Queenstown Airport Corp employees stationed at the airport to manage the facilities believe the airport of its sole and economic viability, given that in the past it has required less than half the equivalent full-time staff members. Wanaka Airport was created by pioneers of the New Zealand aviation community, Sir Tim Wallace, George Wallace, and my father Simon Spencer, who received the Queen's Service Medal for his contribution to aviation in this country. He and many others regrassed the runway, picked stones, controlled rabbits, fenced boundaries, and created the airport's long-term plans and vision, and contributed financially to build Stone Gateway that now stands proudly at Wanaka Airport. This was all in the best interest of the community asset that is Wanaka Airport. My father is an aviation pioneer. It is my hope that his lifetime work in aviation training is my family's future and the future of the many families that my company employs are not destroyed by Queenstown Airport Corp and its corporate bullies. Come out and talk to the users without Queenstown Airport Corp's influence. Get the real story. Wanaka Airport is a community asset, much like the yacht club, rugby grounds, golf course, and parks and recreation areas. It should not be commercialised to the point where it causes hardship to the community members and the users that it serves. It takes courage for you guys to pause, but I can only hope that you as community leaders listen to the pleas such as mine and take into consideration the effects that your actions will have on not only the livelihoods of my staff and the community which we operate, but also the future of aviation in this country. We respectfully ask that QLDC, not QAC, reconsider the blanket application of these fees and explore alternative models that would more fairly reflect the diversity of Wanaka Airport's use. For instance, cap monthly or annual rate for flight training organisations and resident operators in line with other airports around New Zealand and globally. Exemptions and further reductions for flight training activities. Consultation with local New Zealand Qualifications Authority registered training organisations to develop a collaborative fee structure. We are committed to working constructively with Wanaka Airport to ensure that the airport is both financially viable and a welcoming hub for aviation, learning, tourism, charter, emergency services work, and a gateway to the Wanaka region. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Pete. Any questions?
So, obviously, we get advice from the staff here, but if you've never had any fee structure where you bought a bulk number of landings, it's always been in there. So at the moment, you're paying $13 landing. Is that for every student landing?
For you.
So you haven't had a...
Times that by 150 flights.
Yeah, I understand that. But I don't know why I thought that we had to have a structure in place where you were able to buy for training schools by bulk number of landings.
And the problem I was being that the way of measuring the landings is erroneous. So therefore it requires my team's time.
Like measuring
Measuring the landings, how it's done now is erroneous. Therefore, you know, there's more than one landing counted per flight because of the type of operation that happens. And it's taken my team a lot of time to go through and go back and figure out if 2 or 3 or more landings have been charged per flight.
So how are they doing it with the camera still?
Manually. Well, they're doing it through cameras and radio calls. There's been a lot of conversation between myself and other users to try and progress this bulk landing charge, but it's been met by a bit of a breakthrough.
So with the aircraft parking. So how many aircraft you got parking on in ground? Don't you, haven't you got leased area where you park your?
So we have a leased area where we house our helicopters, but our fixed wings are parked on the grass acre area. So there's
How many fixed wing? You got three?
three of them.
And there's no area available to lease for that, for those aircraft.
Thank you. Yeah, Lars asked a couple of questions I had, but one I'm just curious about. You talked about potentially flight training collaborative kind of structure with NZQA. Are you meaning we effectively bundle up different tiers of certification and assign those per student or chopper, or what are you thinking?
Potentially, so our packages are sold as a bundle, so an X amount of cost over a 2-year period to complete their diploma in aviation. You know, when the fees change like this, it affects margin, it also affects, you know, it has to be passed on to the student, which we cannot do. We have certain increases we're allowed to do over the period, so, and it's another way of having NZQA registered service providers is that you know they're a legitimate flight training operation.
So that would give you some sort of certainty around the cost over the time frame of those 2 years. But
and we might,
however many licensed students you had.
yeah, we might sell a license 2 years in advance. And it's a 2-year process to gain a diploma in aviation. So the difference between 2 years ago and now all goes into changing the margin and the cost for our training.
Right, okay, thank you.
So
My other question was around the touch and goes, but I think Lars, you've already answered that, so thanks.
So what you're just saying then is that someone's paid you, 2 years before they get their license for the whole package.
It goes into a public trust account.
Right, yeah, and then other charges like this come in during that time.
Yep.
Yeah, right. I know we have had discussions about how landings are recorded and whether touch and go landings for continuous flight are recorded as a separate landing.
And we've worked through that and they're not meant to be, but due to the system, they are quite regularly charged.
It's interesting to note as well. I had one question about one of the points you made about the charges for the grass apron parking. You mentioned it costs almost 10 times more than per square metre than the current rent charged for existing buildings. Can you just clarify how that's?
So there was worked out on the square metre area of a fixed wing aircraft,
Right.
based upon your fee for that, for the overnight parking, times that by annually.
Yeah.
That's how you want it.
How many square metres is the plane taking?
Off the top of my head, I think it was about 25.
Right, and yet, and the charge, the proposed charge, currently it's $0, but it's been proposed to go to $10.
And you don't charge parking in the airport for vehicles. So why are we being charged parking for aircraft?
Very good. No, very good submission. Any other questions?
Oh, yeah, just remind me, how many other training flight schools out there you fly? Are they still
Just the two of us.
just two of you?
Yep.
Okay. They just do fixed wing.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
You mentioned on the submission and you said it today, one of the last helicopter flight training schools in New Zealand.
And with mountain training conditions as well, which.
Well, we don't have to see what happened to what the Aero Club at Queenstown Airport. So Learn to Fly New Zealand, we purchased that over COVID because it was the last remaining sort of genuine fixed wing flight training operation in the Queenstown Lakes District. We don't want to push that stuff away to Dunedin or Invercargill. That we need that here. We can be the educational hub here, and that's our drive is to do it through our community.
Very good. Okay, thank you very much. Right, we can start with Mr. White.
Can I wait till my allotted time, because Amber, who's the following speaker, is very nervous and she would like us to do ours together.
Right,
And I'm hoping she's here by my allotted time.
that's fine. We've got a lot of time. I don't see any issues. It's a bit away for a few minutes. It's 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll adjourn for 5 minutes, if that's acceptable. That's right, we're back in on, so the next submitter is Melissa White.
All right, thank you for having me today. I'm surprised how nervous I am actually. Given that I'm around the table reasonably often. I will. I know, that's today. I will take the submission as read. Amber, who is the next submitter, is actually quite frightened to speak, so we're planning on kind of just doing it together. I was going to talk and she would be here to answer questions. She is also in the same position as me. She's got a young family, so very likely something has come up that means she's either running late or not able to be here. I just want to run through a few points in my submission and go over a few other things as well to support, I guess, what I'm asking for. So the situation that we find ourselves in is there's a very small group of people that she's just got here in Pounder Park, so maybe she can just come in and then we can use both of our time. That's all right. Sorry, she's saying, is it in the library? Can I just message her that she needs to come upstairs? Sorry. Okay, so the threshold for needing to be registered for a cake decorator is a complicated thing. Well, it's not complicated in that you cross the threshold if you make more than 20 cakes a year for money, and seems to be different in different areas how that is allocated. Anyway, once you are past this category, you then are into a food control plan, which requires to be registered with the council. Currently, what's happening is that we are getting charged exactly the same amount as every other restaurant in town. And what I believe is that it does not take as long to complete the registration and the audit for our businesses. So in terms of being able to change where that threshold is and how home businesses like this are registered, there is currently work going on lobbying central government to make those changes, but because it's such a small number of people with very limited time, it's an almost impossible task. So there's no other options for us if we want to do this legally, and there's plenty of people that don't bother registering and just make food from home and sell it. So it's not practical for small, part-time, low-risk businesses. Hi Amber, if you want to come to this. This is Amber. Is it okay that we just do this together and she's here to answer any questions? So yes, we're complete direct competition, but that doesn't mean we are on the same team in this, that it's a little bit. So I'll do my talking, and then if you've got any questions, we can both answer them. So I have contacted over the years, and we're talking the last 10 years, I've contacted MPI plenty of times to ask what can be done about it, and their response is council sets the fees, council can change the fees, council can have different fees for different types of businesses. Whenever I've asked in the past, which is pretty much every time I have an audit, can the fees be reduced? I just get the standard line that there's no way that the fees can be reduced. It's a set by council fee, unable to reduce it no matter what. There has been one occasion where I have managed to get the fee reduced. This was a few years ago when actually we're in a similar situation that we are now, that the audits were very far behind. So an external company based in Christchurch was employed to help get up to date with audits. These were done via Zoom because it was during COVID time. That audit took 45 minutes, even via Zoom, to complete, which by Zoom was a lot harder. And when I asked that person, I asked how much they were going to be charging the council. And this was back when the fee for audit was $750. And she was very surprised that I would then be charged $750 regardless of what it cost her. As a result of that, and because I flagged that with her, I did actually get charged that length, and I just got charged for the 2 hours. Because I am realistic that it's not just the time that of the actual audit, that there is prep time and there is write-up time, but I just find it very hard to believe that we can go from 1 hour maximum in the kitchen to a 6 hour fee with no reduction ever. So in the submission, I did break down a little bit in my last, because I'm quite a pain in the neck about this and ask for a breakdown every single time. So last year I got charged up to an hour for setting up my audit. The reason for this was because, again, the system doesn't work for little companies like ours. So I got a message saying, your audit is going to be on the 21st of January at X time. And I emailed back and I said, oh, well, I can't do that date because I'm away. I mean, it was school holidays. It's not an unreasonable time for someone to be away. So we're not like other businesses where you can just say, we're coming at your opening hours. We don't have opening hours. Amber's probably the same as me. We work in the evenings, we work in the weekends, we don't work normal hours. So then to get charged $150 an hour to set up an appointment, because that's how long it took to go back and forth to say, because they did actually came back and said, no, that's the time, you have to do it then. And I had to go back and say, I am on leave, I am not in town. Do you expect me to come back from holiday to be at this audit? So there's little things like this that we're getting charged for. What to me, it just seems to be, it's making up the 6 hours to justify the 6 hours. So there's little things that could be changed to make this process a lot smoother. So I'm actually going to go back to my notes rather than ramping on. Reduction of fees, talked about that. So I guess the question is, do we have the balance right? How many of the organisations go over the 6 hours? How many go under? I suspect that a lot, and when I've spoken in the past to staff, the amount that go, if you go an hour over your 6 hours allocated for the cost, you're not charged. So you're only charged if you go an extra hour over the 6. And then, so for me, what I believe is there's probably quite a few companies that use just over their 6 hours, and a very, very small number that use considerably less than the 6 hours. So what I'm asking for is to, for those very small, very low risk. So we are actually really low risk in terms of food safety hygiene, but because of the MPI categorisation, we are in this category and we're unable to change that. What we are able to change is the fees for very low risk, small at-home businesses. So I'm not talking about an at-home business that is working with meat. That's different. I'm talking about at-home businesses that literally are making a couple of cakes a week. And I've put in my submission what I think would be a fair cost of both the yearly registration fee and the reduction of the audit fee. And I've also, based on my calculation of there literally being 5 to 10 of us in this category across the whole district, how much that would cost the organisation, and that it really wouldn't be, it's not going to change. This is not going to make rates go up. This is really not going to make any difference at all for the majority of the people, but it will make a really big difference for these small businesses. And the other thing I'd just like to know, in the past 12 months, we have actually had 3 cake decorators go out of business, and a couple of those have cited just the increase of costs going up. So here, there's 2 things here. One, you know, you're losing those businesses from town, and all I hear is that we're putting more money into growing businesses. Why can't we help businesses that are already here? And I'm not asking for something for nothing. I'm just saying I don't believe that these are the true costs for registering small businesses. The other part of that argument is that by having such high costs, you are preventing people from entering the market. So you have got probably a lot of people, not probably, but you see it on Facebook all the time. There's people selling selling food from home often, and they're not registered, but they're not going to bother registering because it is actually just so expensive. So by having this at such a high rate, you have more people operating illegally, which is completely the opposite goal of what this is, because actually you want people to be operating in a safe and not going to make people sick environment. Let me just see. So all of the people that I'm talking about are self-employed. There's no employees. That's one of the reasons that this it really doesn't take as long, because you've got no employees, you've got limited. In terms of the food control plan, when you look at what a cake decorator has to do compared to the full food control plan, which is something like 140 pages long, around 30 to 40% of that's not even relevant to cake decorators, because it's all about meat, it's all about keeping food hot. There's so many things that doesn't need to be checked when you come to our kitchens, because it's just not relevant. So the other thing is the 70-30 split on the fees. So when we say there's a 70-30 split on these fees in terms of public-private good, what I believe is that actually businesses are paying at least 100% of their costs, that 30%, and I do think that they're covering some of the other costs of the food control, because you've got the checking, I don't know what the right word is, but the other, when they need to check people who aren't doing the right things, you don't pay for that. So in saying that we're only paying 70% of the costs, I don't think that that's accurate. I think that businesses are paying 100% of their costs. It's just covering the part of that department that no one else pays for, if that makes sense. Okay, I think that is almost it. So yeah, what we're really looking for is very small, low risk, very compliant operations that take the same amount of time. I just can't believe that it takes the same amount of time as a normal restaurant. We actually walk into normal restaurants often because we're delivering cakes, and it is such a completely different kettle of fish. So to say that they take the same is just, I find that really, really hard to believe. Okay, last point before questions. There will be an argument provided that the fees that I'm talking about are not currently part of this consultation. I actually disagree with that this is the only opportunity that there is to make change. Every single time I've questioned this, it's always been this is a decision of council and we can't go back on it. So this is the only opportunity to make a change here. So I am asking for the reduction that I have specified in the submission, and or some flexibility around charging for these businesses that really are very low risk and small operations.
Very good. And there was anything else you wanted to add to what was just said?
She did it perfectly. Yeah.
Any questions?
Oh, yeah. Just can I got it all in the submission, but just clarify, you pay an annual food control plan fee of, what's your?
So, okay, so there's two fees here. So you pay a registration fee yearly. Yearly. And so what this registration fee covers, it covers them issuing a new certificate, issuing you an invoice, and re-registering you on the MPI website. That is what is currently about to go up to $300. Plus there is actually, one thing I didn't talk about, there is a new MPI fee, and I haven't got it in front of me, but the new fee this year should only be $56, and I think that we've got it in there for $125. So I want to get that clarified, and I want to get that correct.
Was that directly from MPI?
That's from MPI. So they are now wanting to charge every food business as well, and they're getting the council to collect it. So it looks really bad on the council because it's, again, money they just have to pass straight on.
That's
to
not part of the 300.
That's not part of the 300,
Okay.
that's on top of the
And
300.
then you've got the
So
audit.
so the 300 is for technically 2 hours work, and that gets you your new certificate, your invoice. So again, I can't see how that takes 2 hours.
Yeah.
And I'm only arguing for small businesses. If you want to take that money off other people, I don't care. And then the audit fee, which is about to go up to $895, which is actually not a huge increase. That there was a huge increase last year, which I didn't submit on, other people did submit it on, but nothing was done in terms of small businesses. So I'm back on that same thing. And that audit fee gives you up to 6 hours. That's the 6 hours that you get paid for the audit. So an audit includes setting up the meeting, it includes.
Yeah, I'll help you with that.
Yeah.
I don't want to cut you off, but that's what it is.
No, that's right, okay.
I've got all that. You talk about 5 to 10 small businesses. How do you come to that figure?
Because I looked through the 600 that are online registered in our area and I counted them.
Are they all over the place or what?
And they're in Wanaka and Queenstown. I'm talking about that's cake decorators that work from home. This is at home. This is not, I'm not talking about cafes. I'm not talking
What
about.
about I've got another that does food preparation in a place, private place in Elton, for example. They've got some people turning up and working there, prepare food. So that will include.
I've only
It's not understand where you draw the line here.
Well, that's why I'm saying draw the line at one, no staff,
No staff.
owner operators, at home, part-time if you need it to be, because the reality is for cake decorators, most people are, this is a part-time job.
So if someone wanted to go where do you pick up the travel costs for the person coming and do the audit?
So say that again.
So
Well,
person travelling from Queenstown to Wanaka to do an audit, who pays for that?
but at the moment, everybody is paying for that. So at the moment, the way that it works is they're saying within that 6 hours for everybody, they allocate 1 hour to travel.
Okay.
So again, I don't necessarily agree with that. I feel like at $150 an hour, the travel costs of staff are already included in that. That's my how I feel. And the reality is there's so many people in Wanaka, there should be a staff member in Wanaka.
So okay. The bit about deterring others from operating, so they operate illegally. So if they're getting away with it now, if the fee was reduced, are they likely to sign up?
I would say more would sign up. I would say it's definitely a deterrent for people.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Got a couple of.
So if someone isn't making 20 grand a year, they don't need
20 grand, hell no, 20 cakes.
of cakes.
Cake decorators probably only, I'm talking cake decorators would
So
make
if
in
you
a
make-
year what a restaurant makes in a week.
So if you're making 20 cakes a year, then it triggers that you need a plan.
In some areas, you probably want to talk to the regulatory about what the rules are here, because you probably, that rule is looked at differently across the country.
I'm just trying to get my head around the thresholds and what is low risk, like I hear you on
So
home occupier and those sorts of bits. And I know we've got, we've had conversations around what is a work from home kind of situation. So low risk and limits, I'm trying to understand people that are operating without registration.
yeah,
Is there a legal way to do that? Or is everyone operating illegally? What is the trigger that says you must have a food control plan across any type of operation? Do you know? This might be a question.
it might be.
And I can do that. And
You might be able to answer it better because
We
of
might
my
ask that.
understanding, and I only know.
We might ask that later, because your
Yeah.
time is nearly up. So.
Okay,
we
all
get
right,
to-
well, you can, yeah.
Yeah.
So, anything
But
else?
can I answer from my point of view, and they can get the actual thing?
Very quick, it's 20 minutes.
And I'm used. But yes, so there's low risk, what's determined by MPI, and then there's the, there's something to do with cake decorators that put us in that high risk, and I honestly have never really understood what it is. And yeah, it just tips us over the threshold.
As long as you're doing cakes, not mushrooms, all right.
So very quickly,
Mushroom cake?
because we are out of time, but very quickly, so in your summary of the cost, you've got the proposed fee is $300, and then you said actual cost $420.
Well, because I'm doing, the reason that I put those in is because that's the 70-30 split. So if you're
Right.
saying that there's a 70-30 split on this, then actually, these are actually only, it's just an illustration of where the actual costs lie. So that's where I got that increase.
Okay, so that's just pushing it up to 100.
Yeah, that's based on the revenue and financing policy of the 70-30 split, saying that.
So you pay the 70 and that actual is with another.
Well,
30.
no, I actually don't think the actual is that. I think that the actual is the 30 is paying for other things.
Right, well,
Time's up.
so thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you.
Sandra.
All right, so that brings the public submissions to a close. So now we move into deliberations. Doesn't say on here, but do the staff present? And there's obviously a little submission or presentation that's come through this morning quite late. Does that get presented to us prior to deliberations? Or you know it all?
Yeah, if you want us to.
Haven't had a chance to read it because it only came in at 25 minutes before the meeting started, so.
There's a slideshow there that's being opened just to help guide the conversation if you'd like to use it. Because it's reflects a lot of the information that's within the submission report that you received a week prior.
So I think now that we're moving into deliberations, it will be an opportune time to just run through that. If we've got anyone here that's happy to run through it.
We might invite Catherine to speak to the sort of initial slide or two.
Great.
And then that really passes over the chair discussion as we like.
Just one of the deliberations, just.
This morning. That's attached to it. Third, on the bottom of the slide.
What, the deliberations slide?
So it's-
Yes, through the chair, I received it just about 9:15. So I have emailed it to everybody, but it is the same as what is on the screen.
Yeah, I guess the key thing to think about was the rating impact. So this table on the slide pack is useful just to show you grouped activities and what the increase in revenue that we were proposing. Now, if you decide not to increase the fees to the level that was proposed, then there's obviously a rating impact that needs to be paid by somebody. So yes, that then puts the rates up by those amounts. Just to keep that in mind.
So on that slide where it says parking fees, is that car parking fees or Wanaka Airport parking fees?
That is one, so that's Queenstown car parking
Car parking
fees.
fees.
Yeah.
So then the next one is Wanaka Airport landing fees.
Mhm.
Wanaka Airport parking fees included in that anywhere or?
Yes, the Wanaka Airport grass parking. apron,
Yeah,
grass
that's what I mean,
grass
grass
apron, Wanaka Airport line.
They're included in the
one.
landing fees line, right? Do we know, just going back to the discussion we had about grass apron parking, has that been assessed as a separate item? And has there been, you can come up with a lot, Roger. And has there been any assessment of whether those fees could be considered separately for people that are based at the airport rather than people that are flying in and parking their airplane temporarily?
You've answered my question, that's the intent, it's just for people visiting the airports, it's not for the commercial private operators that are based at the airport.
Right.
And that's why in the parking fees, it says first hour free, so if someone just lands and drops off and picks up people, then they're not charged for parking for an hour. If they park their plane for 1, 2, 3 days, then they're charged. But the intent is not for the operators and the private owners of the airport as it is now to be charged grass parking for apron fees. If it is required that a commercial operator needs an area to park their planes for a permanent spot, then we may look at that separate LTO or something like that. Right. But that's the whole intention of the parking fee, and the parking fees have always been there in terms of the asphalt apron. It's just we've not had a grass one, but it is just for pilots visiting.
So what was the asphalt parking fee? What cost was it?
Is it on the schedule?
Yes, it is.
Oh, is it? Sorry.
Yeah, which have always been available on the website.
We heard the submission from Peter that they're 3 fixed wing flight training school planes, so they haven't got another separate license to occupy a leased area for the helicopters they keep in their current leased area.
Yep.
But they park 3 fixed wing on the grass apron, I guess. So they need to sit down with you and work out a license to occupy a lease thing for a permanent solution rather than paying a $10 a day.
There was never the intention for it.
So it is continued to not be charged.
Okay.
So the $10 per 24 hours, first hour free for a 0 to 15 kg airplane on the grass apron really applies to visiting.
Yeah,
plane.
itinerant pilots which visit from
So our local lessees and occupiers, that fee would not be
no,
applicable to them.
no.
Does that need to be clarified in that
Noted.
schedule?
Mm.
Or how is it? Because obviously there's been some confusion with what we've heard today in the submission. So
Imagine we could put for visiting pilots, but the issue we've had was people parking on the asphalt and realising they could park on the grass for nothing and just moving their plane over to there. So there'll be actual proper plan of where planes can park when they're visiting from other areas on the grass apron, but also take into consideration about permanent commercial operators if they need an area all the time, to set aside an area for that, so that these visitors don't actually then go and park in their area if they're off doing training flights.
Right.
So it's important to have a dedicated area.
and those areas they have tie-downs as well.
Yeah,
And
I
everything.
can say it.
No, they don't.
You know,
So my question is what facilities do you provide?
hang on. Right. So the other question was about landing fees, and I know we've had a discussion about touch and go landings, or within a training flight, a number of different landings. How is that being?
Well, 70% of the helicopter fees aren't chargeable because they are, as was described in the submission, that for a fixed wing touch and go, you just pay once, even though you may touch and go 5, 6, 10 times. And similar to helicopters, that you pay once, and 70% of helicopter fees aren't chargeable because of that very scenario. And they are picked up by the AIMS radio system, which is used nationally. So it's a recognised system that's used nationally to pick up radio calls.
To monitor or to record
Yep.
those landings. Yeah.
Yep.
But it does sound like, so the submission we heard today, sounds like that might not be working fully as intended. I don't know, we don't necessarily have any evidence of that, but
No,
is there potential that might be the case?
we can review that with the staff to just check, and we do check with AIMS because they have all the back data they can review, right, and can go through the radio calls.
Okay.
We do that quite often for Lanoki Airport, which is the same system used there.
So is that a automated monitoring of the radio calls, or is it just someone manually listening to them?
No, it's sort of automated, but you then can go and manually view as well.
Okay, I don't know whether it's as simple as saying, well,
Yeah,
you know, there might be some touch and goes, but it's actually when they come off the runway and onto the taxiway or the apron that it's then the end of the flight.
you get into some
Yeah.
technical detail. that I
Yeah,
can't
I'm not an
answer
aviation,
right
it's
here
like,
and now.
that's really- Pete may have his views, but he can't speak now, sorry.
Oh, yeah, so it's raised points that can be addressed, on management, on operations with the user group anyway. If the, you know, points have been raised in the submission, if there needs to be checked out, we can check that out separately.
Yeah, very good.
The, sorry, the dollar figure, the 66,000 you put in there for honing in on the Wanaka Airport a lot. That includes, assessment, I guess, of presumption of some parking and planning fees. So we don't probably have a breakdown of because a lot of most of the land use down in Wanaka are the lowest category, the small, under 1,500.
Yep, about 70%.
70%, is it?
They're in the low 2 weight categories. And
Yeah, I'm just trying to think how that affects the dollar, the overall dollar thing. Yeah, okay.
yeah, so the biggest volumes in the last dollar.
Okay, no, that's all very good, understood.
For example, APRs, we only have 5. a
Yeah.
year. So,
Right, so I don't know if there's anything else on that particular table we need to ask any.
Well, just the comment, the question is not maybe can't be addressed here, but is there any appetite to discuss bulk landing fees for schools or anything like that? I know it's an operational thing outside of here, but
yes, there is. I mean, there's different scenarios for landing fees. There's per passenger fees, depending on the regular public transport. So there's various different scenarios that are available. We got an external assessment based on like for like similar type airports of what they were doing, which then informed what we put forward, which was QLDC driven, not based.
understood.
My questions were the same things around that, looking at capping amounts of landings or working collaboratively as the submitters suggested around training, because I think there's real significant value in our training and education piece. And I note, for example, the reason we get so many fixed wing pilots up to their number of hours is literally because of our skydiving operations and all day. And that's a very unique kind of symbiotic relationship between tourism and flight education, and the same with our helicopter fleet, because we seriously are depleted in our safe and skilled pilots in New Zealand, and Queenstown, Wanaka has traditionally been such a fundamental place to learn to fly safely in mountain conditions and in really changeable weather. So I'd really like to think that we could work with our user group into being quite almost niche in how we consider it. I think we are quite unique in what we deliver here, and with our whole economic diversification piece around Learn Queenstown, that we could really value our aviation training sector, while at the same time, I think that, while it is kind of a community service focused training that was pointed to, let's also not underestimate the value for money that landing in Wanaka offers to our itinerant pilots compared to other airports comparatively around the country. And I even think of Ardmore, Barrier, other kind of recreational pilot users, that to me it's never made much sense that this airport doesn't break even when we've got so much opportunity there and collaborative uses. So I just think we're not quite there in getting the balance right, hearing from our current occupiers about being a better landlord, and hopefully that feeds into our master planning conversation around how we navigate some of those more challenging topics that were brought up today. But I do think, yeah, looking at a way to enable some kind of cap or bulk negotiation of rates to balance it out. I don't think we should be dropping our total revenue expectation for Wanaka Airport. I just think there's other ways to make this work, and at the moment I just don't feel like we've got it quite right.
Right. It's good. It might just be worth nipping through the rest of those slides. I mean, I think there's a lot of pie charts there which summarise the feedback. Right.
So this was just a reminder of the questions that were in the proposal. So the first question was a general one around CPI plus rounding, and as you can see there was half and half, I guess, position. And that's sport and rec. It was a question on whether they're happy with the increases on sport and rec fees. So just over half, I guess, in opposition here. Parking for the Queenstown Town Centre. Again, just over half. Bearing in mind there's very few submissions. There's only 62 in total. Wanaka Airport, I just talked about. Neutral, most I've had just over half neutral. Oops. Planning and development fees, I think was strong support there, just under half, for making sure it's 100% paid for by the user. And then a strong neutral. Dog fees, just about half is neutral. And working cap, strong support of neutral and strong support for that. And then it was parking in the town centre. There's a split of all the different pieces of feedback. That's it.
So now would be the chance to ask any of the staff that are in the room any other questions if we've got any particular questions to ask.
Oh, yeah.
If that's
Through
allowed.
each one of those. Or...
Just in general, any particular topics.
Well, Mr. Chair, some of the dollar amounts, you're like, I don't seen that big, but it's when we say, we keep telling the community, and it comes up with dog fees, we come out to mention and submissions again that put aside CPI, the costs have increased, therefore we've got to charge for it. It's just a matter of how we communicate that. There's, I run another thing where I have a spreadsheet and I know each year what the costs are, and I'm sure you've got all this, but it's just a matter of how we can, rather than say, oh yeah, the costs have gone up, so we've got to put fees up. Explain what costs have gone up. Is it just the wages, and is it something else, or is it another expense? The fuel price, buying another vehicle, I don't know what they are. But so we can justify for the dog registration, 62,000 increase. Why do we need that 62,000? And when we're taking out in this, with the response to the submissions, well, the dog poo bins and that all comes separately. I don't know who pays for the, because we've got another thing come up with the regulatory contract. The after hours thing for dogs, does that come out of the 62, or is that funded some other way? It's sort of understanding and how we sort of communicate that to the people out there that this is the fee increase, this is the fee increases to pay for this real cost increase. You know what I'm saying? Is there any comment on that?
Only thing I'd say is, as you know, there's many lines.
I know there are many lines. You put them down to
break down every single line with, each component, I guess, of each fee, quite an onerous. Through the LTP, we do a review of all the costs and fees and charges and build those up. We have the revenue and financing policy, which council have set through the long-term plan, which says, for example, animal control is 70% private funded through fees and charges. So, you know, we are setting the fees at the level set by the revenue and financing policy. So there is that mechanism that you can change through the next LTP to change those percentages if you think it's an unfair burden on the user pay element. But yeah, a lot of, I mean, as everyone knows, you know, salary and wages are a big component of our user fees and charges. So you can only rationalise that part of the fee cost is to do with salary and wages. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so it's like, I'm just saying, like a simple picture about how many people are employed with animal control. So they're based on inflation or whatever, their pay's gone up this month. It'd be quite easy to explain 62,000 that way. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Lines underneath. There's multiple.
I know there's multiple lines, and I'm just picking out the key ones.
Yeah.
You don't have to go to every line. I'm just trying to respond to some of the submissions. You know, they say, oh, and you keep saying that fees go up, the costs go up. Or the other thing is you drop the level of service, so you couldn't understand that. I see that's the dilemma I have with the responding to some of the submissions. Not only in dogs, it's mentioned in a couple of others too.
If I may, through the chair. Okay. Thank you. I back Councillor Cox's comments around our communication on the dog piece, and reading a lot of the submissions. What I'm hearing is that our community interpretation of the whole environment of having a dog in the district is something that we might be able to frame up some more communication around. Some of the things I noted, there's this expectation of provision of plastic bags by council, and yet as a responsible dog owner, husbandry of our animal waste is something that we're responsible for. And I think our communities still need to understand whether it's okay to flick it under a bush with a stick and get rid of it, but you don't, you know, are our legislation and guidelines so strict that you must put it in a plastic bag and take it home in your car or find a bin to deposit it in? Because then we're creating these next expectations of there will be rubbish bins to put it in. And that again is not something that we want, a proliferation of bins that we're then having to resource with wage cost to go out and empty the bins, and all of these accumulated costs that people just don't kind of wind back and understand. These are just the things of owning a dog. Unfortunately, we're having to, because of our funding and finance policy, we're having to split the cost across a smaller number of dogs. And there were some submitters that felt that the numbers might have gone down because the costs have increased. And I'm sure that that is a consideration for some families in the district. However, I think it's also important to note that during COVID, our dog ownership rates skyrocketed because everybody was home and felt that having a dog was exactly what we needed to bring more well-being into our families over that time. However, once you're back at work and not working from home, then the management of those members of our family becomes a little more arduous and also costly. So there might have been many contributing factors into our decline in number of furry residents in our community. That means those dog control costs are now carried across a smaller user base. I don't think we give enough education around the fact that it is the dog control piece that we're actually having to cover. And personally, I've been absolutely astounded at the number of dog hearings that we have to participate in the district, and also the challenge around those hearings and the process and due diligence and impact on communities when those hard decisions have to be made around the fur members of our community. I really would like to see some of the suggestions that submitters put in around, can we advocate somehow for more dog-friendly spaces? These are members of our communities, and I get really annoyed that we can't lobby ORC to let our companion animals travel more easily, to have hitching posts in our places that are dog-friendly outside libraries or community facilities as a standard. We put bollards everywhere. What's wrong with a bollard with a couple of hooks on it? Water bowls, even if they're not filled, dog drinking stations, or I just think that this is a real opportunity to become a little more global in our thinking. If you look at Europe, if you look at the United States, dogs are on aircraft, dogs are on trains, dogs are in restaurants. And I just,
fees.
well, you know, who knows? It might be that we're actually just understood a little more, that we're bringing some balance back to being welcome to these community members. But I really support the ideas that were raised around our working dog caps. And I'd like to understand if we could perhaps look at a way to consider teams of dogs. And I don't know practically how that would work around having to have individuals. But if it's a system consideration or a fee consideration, I think we need to acknowledge working dogs. And that's.
So I've got a question on that front. Thanks, Mary. So working dogs, I mentioned earlier that perhaps all the dogs are registered, they only pay for two, is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
So all dogs will be registered,
Yeah.
which is the top two that will be charged on the invoice.
Yeah, so the first two that they write down.
Correct.
Those, yeah.
The first two that are on the invoice, so the first two that pop up on the invoice, yeah.
Can you remind me, when, with all the different categories of dog registration, what does the term positive relate to?
So that's a dog that has positive history. So in the enforcement strategy, we reward dog owners who have positive history, fenced, neutered dogs, things like that.
Okay.
And the majority of our working dogs do actually fit under that category of positive. So it's 93%. So they're paying that $60 fee or proposed $60 fee rather than the 100.
So then the dangerous dog and menacing dog, they have a category for positive and fenced and positive. Is that if they've got no prior other than the one that's classified them as dangerous and menacing? Yeah. And then if they have a second incident, then they'll go up the list of, they'll lose that positive status.
Correct.
Yeah.
The positive history is removed for 2 years. When you lose that history, it
Right.
is removed for 2 years. After 2 years, you gain that positive history back.
Right.
If something else happens after those 2 years, then that would be removed again.
Okay, yeah. Well, that's interesting. I didn't realise there was that effect. And I don't expect you to know how Central Otago District Council arrive at their working dog fee of $12. It seems very
We're quite consistent across the country. The last year's fees were very consistent with the majority of the country. Most councils were sitting around that $50 mark.
Right.
Our new proposed fee is $60 for the positive fenced, dogs for working dogs.
Yeah.
And my understanding is that a number of the councils are increasing their fees this year as well.
Okay, and yeah, that's right. So also I think with us, well, my thoughts, and you might be able to confirm or you might not make any comment, is that in an area that has a large portion of working dogs, you've mentioned, I think, in other forums that the working dogs aren't the ones that are creating work for dog control officers. If you've got a high proportion of working dogs compared to pets, there's possibly less demand on dog control services overall, whereas we have a potentially higher proportion of pet dogs than working dogs. And as Lisa mentioned, we do seem to have a lot of dog hearings.
Great.
Which obviously, that's the top of a whole lot of work that's gone into getting to that stage. Okay.
That cap is to recognise the less use of working dogs of the service, is to, that cap is introduced to recognise the less use of that service.
Yeah. I think we do get the dog report every once in a while too. I think it doesn't mention in there how many working dogs we have in the district. How
Yeah,
many-
I've got that number
I
here.
can't remember.
It's on it.
We're actually going to have a presentation on that September.
I thought it was coming up.
Yeah.
If you take into account that you cap it at 2 at 115, that's 230 for working. And a muster with 6 dogs in Tasman will be paying $300.
We only have one dog that's at that higher fee, so the majority of our dogs are sitting at a $60 fee.
Right.
So
Oh, okay, sure.
93% are sitting, so
So my point is, if you pay $50 for a working dog in Tasman, then you've got 6 of them, that's $300. Yeah. So you got to balance it out, yeah, I understand. So obviously the capping thing is very popular.
Whereas here you pay 120 if you're on that fence positive, paying for 2. If you have 20 dogs, it's still only paying $120.
Yeah, the other opportunity we've got coming, obviously, the dog feed will go out 2nd of July. There's an opportunity there to do some comms around what the services they get for feed.
Yeah.
So we can do that.
There's some things for that as well.
Very good, thank you. Any other questions on dogs? Dog fees and charges? I guess there was another comment in one of the submissions, the written submissions about cemetery fees, particularly related to babies and children.
Too far.
I don't know.
Too far, Karen.
I think charging Lionel Simons.
No, I said, don't go too far.
Yeah, no, I'm stepping into Tassie. I think Tassie's online as well, but I'm stepping into.
So the comment was there, but the response to that was that those fees won't be necessarily considered under this hearing, but there's a cemetery user handbook.
Handbook being developed in November, of which that can be certainly looked at.
Right.
Principles.
Yep.
Right. Okay. So, and is it something that has been considered? Has it been brought to the council's attention before?
Absolutely, yes. Tassie is well aware. There's a number of things that will need to be put forward as options within the cemetery handbook in November, and obviously community will have to say on that as well.
Okay. Is that a new document or is it an existing one?
I believe it's actually an existing one that's been updated.
Yep. Okay. Okay. Are there any other questions about cemeteries fees? There were some comments about, there were quite a lot of comments just about forest rises in general, but also about sports and recreation, seeing as your head's on it.
Yes.
Might be a good chance to explain that, but are those sports and rec fees, there's a private public split on those as well?
Yes, that's correct. So the split is currently 60-40.
Right, okay, 60 for the user,
60
40 plus rates.
Correct.
Yeah.
Sorry, 60% subsidy by council and 40% by users.
Oh, right, the other way, right, okay.
All right.
Question read the slim fees if I could.
60-40.
Yeah, would be a good chance in a minute.
Is that Simon Wild, we've got you, thank you.
The pool is 60-40.
Right.
Yes. The
60,
60 subsidised by
Yeah.
council and 40 user charges.
right. Okay.
Just a question on swim fees. Do those, so it was talked about the swim program in schools. And that can you explain to me the funding of that?
Yes.
And does that come from a portion of that funding that goes towards all of the school swim programs? Does that come from these swim fees as well?
Yes, it does. So the staff costs certainly, well, the operations and the staff costs certainly go towards school programs. So at the moment we receive $3.12 per student that comes in. And that's through the Central Lakes Trust and through Sport Otago. It's part of the Learn to Swim overall program. So they subsidise the students $3.12. And we obviously then run the programs on that basis. So we actually make a substantial loss, shall we say, subsidise it extremely heavily to allow school swimming to occur, remembering that that is often the only opportunity that some kids do actually get, and that is generally on generally about 10 lessons per year. For after school lessons, obviously you'll be well aware that council has a living wage ethos, and certainly the wages and the median wage has gone up significantly over the last few years. Essentially that's why we've looking at increasing the fees. However, we do appreciate that it's tough for families, you know, and certainly you get to a price point where it just simply is not economical for a family to actually put people into do swim lessons after school. And it's something that we certainly love to look at in more detail and see whether we can provide some added value or possible subsidies in the future, or look at other alternatives with external funding.
How is the staffing pipeline of resource, and because I know our hours were affected by that over the summer, and it sort of led into that. Back in the day, we all used to do like our bronze medallion, and there was like a training pathway towards. Do those sort of pathways still exist in New Zealand?
Absolutely.
How do we develop our?
So we have this program for Swim, which we are part of, and we work closely with Swim New Zealand as well to deliver that. And so we have our own assessors to be able to train up people for that. We actually have an ethos that we pay $1 more, or roughly, sorry, we pay an amount more than some of our other staff to be able to attract swim teachers, because they are, you know, it's a pretty important role. And we certainly, you know, do struggle to get, you know, good qualified swim instructors, or just people that want to actually be trained up. So we do pay reasonably well compared to the rest of the country around that. However, we do appreciate that it is hard to attract those swim teachers, but certainly we do have good training programs in place, and certainly every holidays and over the Christmas period, a lot of these swim teachers are also employed in our holiday programs as well, and do other jobs as lifeguards, for example.
I think that was a bit around, that was kind of a surprise for me. And therefore, I'm thinking many of it in our community, reading through the submissions, I was really surprised how much we do contribute, getting that reminder around the school programs and also the challenges for our workforce and skilling and hiring that workforce. So a bit like the other comments we've made around understanding the dog fees. I think if we actually remembered that we're contributing into every single school child in the district going through those Learn to Swim programs, it might bring some more visibility around how those fees are come to, and the lack of swim school instructors, health inspectors for restaurants. It's all of these workforce pressures that we see being reflected and having to bring our rates up.
Good. Any questions?
Not on that, but
Extra fees.
let's have a couple of them.
Okay. No. Okay. So many probably take a seat. What other things did you hear from your meeting?
Oh, sorry, I mean to go back to dogs, but just checking. Those figures we gave in there, the 62,000, does that include the change that we came through in the late submission about menacing dog?
It's only 1,700.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's already taken.
It'll come off that, so it'll be 60K.
Yeah.
That'll be at over. I thought the fee,
Was reducing the fee.
Reducing the fee. So we'll get less revenue.
The proposed fee was slightly too high, so it's been.
yeah, but that means there'll be a bigger. Yeah.
So there'll be a reduction in the increase. Really. Everybody?
No, well, if we're not getting so much money, then we've got, and the costs have still gone up. We've got to get that balance from somewhere else, don't we?
It's $1,700. It's probably it gets lost in the rounding, maybe.
Be careful what you say.
Yeah.
And that 1,700 might come from something else in a minute. Where does the funding come from for the dog poo bins and collection and all that? If it's not out of the registration fees.
Yeah, it comes through the sport and rec budget.
Sport and rec.
For reserves.
waste.
For reserves.
Waste. The poo bins come from waste management. So the bags come from our budget, but the waste bins come from the waste management budget.
We done with dogs?
Yeah, I like the dog. I'm still.
You got any other, there is one, obviously, we don't see any item we need to talk about, which is environmental health fees.
And parking.
Parking, have you got some questions on that? Right. What is your question and who are you going to ask it to?
Parking question?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So many submissions on parking. I suppose one of the things I'm trying to understand is how do we myth bust that there's no parks in town when actually our parking revenue shows that we've got capacity? And how much would we have to increase usage? So how many more people would we have to get parking in here to not move the parking charges so much? You sort of see where I'm coming from with that. But again, I think I'm coming back to, I think we've got a real missing piece around the communication of, the removing car parks or these sorts of things of, I understand the impact on the CBD has been horrendous over the last 3 years of disruption, and I don't use horrendous in a dramatic way there. That would probably be reflected by some of our residents and operators. And there's this real fear that we're further discouraging people from coming in. But I do think we're missing the point of parking is free still after 6 p.m. unless we're looking at putting charges on after 6 with this. No. We have got parking lots where it's cheaper, like up at Lakeview. I would like to understand how we could better use of the apps actually directing people to where available parking is. If you drive around the Lake Loop now, there is a lot of available parking. So we're having to crank up rates.
It's possibly something that's more related to the parking strategy or parking management, which is coming later, as opposed to fees and charges for the few streets in Queenstown that do charge.
But it might answer some of our submitters if we were able to, because some of the submissions are around you're putting it up and there's no parks. But actually one of the reasons I'm hearing is we're putting it up because we're actually not getting enough revenue back from the parks because they're not all occupied. So I'm going, how can we incentivise people to understand that there are parks, they can come in and use them, there are areas where you can still walk a bit further and park for free, there's cheaper areas. I just don't think it's very well understood what our parking stock looks like. It's all kind of just lumped into the no parks conversation. So I think I'm in support of the fees where they are, but I think we need to raise awareness that we've got parking available because that's a myth that there's no parking in the CBD.
So no particular questions about these parking proposed charges though?
Well, again, I just think we've had to crank them up because we're not getting the capacity that we budgeted for. So I get that I don't think it goes too high in the very centre of town. And I think we've made provision for the cheaper options, but answering some of our submitters, I don't think they understand those variables.
I don't know, Catherine, whether you want to comment on whether they've been increased to raise revenue, but my understanding was that we've had a situation last year where a lot of the parking rates hadn't been looked at for quite a long time and they were increased, and the intention from then was, which is coming to play now, is that they are then annually reviewed.
Yeah, and obviously we've seen some car parks now closer to town and therefore should be higher. So that's where the bulk of the revenue is coming from, is from those new Ballarat and Stanley Street options.
You actually want our parks to turn over to help the traffic flow, right? And the demand. So look, we have left Lakeview at $2.50, and that is for the purpose, maybe we need to promote it, one of the locals. If you are going to come and park in town for 10 hours, that is our preferred option for you to go and park.
And as you mentioned, a fair chunk of it's coming from the Ballarat street car parks, and one of those is new and it's being upgraded in response to the need for more parking. And that's been a direct response to the community and the business community. But a lot of that revenue is being offset by the cost to create the car park in the first couple of years anyway, isn't it? Which is another conversation that we've had previously. So otherwise there's no other questions on the proposed parking fees, charges? Right.
Not on the parking. Not on that part.
We're going to say why haven't we applied anything to Wanaka here?
Just the Wanaka question that did relate to car parking as well as
What is your question?
Wanaka Airport. Car parking.
Well, there's nothing proposed at the moment.
Nothing was proposed.
It's picked up in the.
So have you got any other topics?
So I hate going back to Rogers to the Wanaka Airport. I just been looking through this thing where we're heading with the fee. Is there an option of if we felt the landing fees for the 0 to 1500 kg at $3 increase, we reduce that and put up the others which are not such a big users, but could it be balanced out? Could we do a wee bit of a jiggle with that to recognise that the majority of users are the 0 to 1500, but we pick up the balance from the smaller number of users with the bigger planes? I know you most probably had a good look at this, but I'm just trying to understand whether there's opportunity to tweak that a little bit.
70%, as I said, come in that lower band, 2 bands, and we have got unfortunately higher dollar increases in that. You'd have to increase those even higher again.
Are you talking about the $58 increases at the top end there?
Well, the ATRs, which is at the 12,000 kgs, there's only 5 landings a year, so proportionally.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's what I'm just asking, whether there's options for, yeah.
And also we're 4,000 kgs, that's the PC12, which is Sounds Air. So it's only going up $12, which is for a 12-seater $1 a person. You don't want to suddenly, it's in its infancy and there's great growth with Sounds Air. We don't want to be hampering that as well.
You put a benchmark, which is saying that it's far too low for fees.
Yes.
So we're trying to kind of get to that middle ground, have an increase, but not to the over.
So comparable to like airports is an important part that we need to always sense check against.
Yeah, okay, so, yeah, okay, the biggest issue there, I guess, is the, like say, the schools that are doing multiple and making sure we're not charging them for every touch and go.
Well, for fixed wing, we don't. It's once, it's with the helicopters and the nature of the training that it's a little different, more to accurately get the right.
Okay, yeah,
for the training session.
right, so I redo it.
That's
Okay.
Okay. No, that's good. Thanks, Roger.
Thanks, Roger.
So then, does that lead us to environmental health first?
Yes.
Okay. And toes at the back.
It does sound.
Carries the lead. So I know we've discussed this topic before, but you've obviously heard the submission. The main question seems to be that minimum charge, which allows for 6 hours of time. What's one of the questions for the review? I guess, is there any scope to have a reduced, because I mean, my understanding is that is a deposit, well, it's not a deposit, but it's the fee, but if you go beyond that, that sounds like if you go more than an hour beyond that, there's an increased fee anyway, is that correct?
You're correct. So it's all based around how long it's anticipated. The vast majority of food businesses will take within those categories. Where there's very poor performance, there's a potential that it will take longer. As you can imagine, if someone's at a level which is performing so badly that we're standing there ensuring that they're throwing food out while we're waiting, that can take a significant amount of time. So that comes back onto the operator in those circumstances. From reviewing the fees over a number of years and considering this submission for a very significant number of years in a row and working with various panels on the same matter, the number of hours in which we take to work through these is landing exactly where we anticipated to. Even specifically for home bakers, but for clarity, for home bakers, we don't control the food category that they fall into. The submitter also acknowledged that MPI are the ones that set those categories, and that's based upon food risk. They've determined that small operators have a risk that makes them the same as some other activities. From our own observations in the field through my environmental health officers, they're very clear that a small operator doesn't necessarily have less risk than a large operator. It all comes down to your systems and processes and your application of them. So that's what the risk is always based around. When we've previously looked at this exact submission in the past, there's always been the ability to consider trying to create some bespoke specific thing for a small operator. Where the panels have landed in the past is they actually have determined it's not appropriate to reward a small operator versus a bigger operator. We just need to focus on how long the activity takes, particularly in the context of the revenue and finance policy, which is focused around user pays for within reason. There is some public good elements, but as touched on by the submitter, those public good elements are generally more in line with education around health issues, engagement with the community and enforcement matters.
Yeah, so when you say the food category is set by MPI, I don't know, I don't understand what the different categories are necessarily, but so that puts them in the same category as obviously other industries other than baking cakes and decorating cakes at home.
That's right. So the very lowest categories are very, it's just like a coffee cart, it's like the lowest category, but a home baker does get captured into an industry standard area that can have more people operating businesses, restaurants, those sorts of things.
So you're telling me the coffee cart is a lower category than the cake baker, a single cake baker?
Yes.
Yeah.
But you'll be careful around the word single, is because it's one person versus 10 people doesn't mean your systems and processes are better. As what we've been talking about last time was around the table with you as a group, not as a panel, but as council, we were talking about the waterfront and the significant non-compliance we had with one-man bands down there. When there was an audit undertaken, there were 8 small operators that were all non-compliant with food hygiene standards.
Right. Yeah, I understand that. But if you look at the number of, I'm a bit surprised based on the number of food caravans and food carts setting up all over the place, that their risk is considered lower than making cakes in a shop.
No, I was specific with a coffee cart. If it's food, it would be very similar category, if not the same category. So I specifically was coffee. I can't sell anything else. Just be fair to everybody.
I apologise.
Boiling water from
And so just one other comment, there was some suggestion that businesses aren't working with council because of the fee schedules. They do have the ability to register elsewhere. Our fees are a lot cheaper. And we are just trying to cover costs. There is no money generated out of this. So if they felt that it wasn't economically viable to be with council, they do have alternatives. We're not the sole source of registration. And we're seeing with our registrations a significant increase in the numbers. And as you've seen also through the discussion last time around the table with the panel and with all council, small operators are increasing very quickly. So
it's hard to put a proportion around income versus the cost at the moment.
So the example that we were given obviously is for cake decorators working at home as a single employee, single owner, operator. Are there any other, do you know if there are any other sort of similar things where someone's working from their home, not necessarily in cakes, that might also be?
The vast majority of businesses fall under a food control plan, which is pretty much everything apart from some very unique small things like salt, coffee cart. So yeah, there's potential that anyone operating a small business from home in the food industry is in the waterfront or anywhere is in the same scenario.
Because I presume a lot of the waterfront food vendors are preparing their food, perhaps in a kitchen at home. I don't know whether they.
It'd likely be a combination of both going on. But where we landed in the same discussion over the last few years around this is whether the panel felt comfortable to make a bespoke category for small operators that are using the same amount of time as a big operator. So do you charge less just out of goodwill to a small operator was the question that was considered, and where you landed last time and for the last few discussions on this was we just need to focus on how long does the job take to be done, charge accordingly.
So I've heard that's been brought up before, but why don't they just keep a type sheet and charge for every job by the hour rather than a 6-hour catch-all?
There's always that consideration. It's something that we consider every time, but do you just charge up? Or within reason, there's always an application type deposit fee across the organisation. Yeah. And, the amount of time is very close with environmental health. We test it every year. It gets looked at again and again, and it gets audited independently as well. Our processes, when individuals do query their hours, and even with the submitted, they advise they queried their hours. We're in line with what we're producing to the community on the forecast for where time does go. There's no doubt sometimes an on-site visit can be shorter than others, but that's not necessarily the bulk of the work. There's a lot of other work that goes on in the background, even just getting to and from sites and everything else.
Okay.
Are there any requirements for safe food handling qualifications? Back in the day, you used to have a food handling certificate as part of your registration process and different numbers of staff and larger organisations. I'm just trying to understand how much the environments become less regulated, I suppose, to understand this low risk, medium risk MPI classification. Back in the day, I used to be a trainer and assessor of those qualifications. And my understanding would be that a home occupied food producer would not be low risk, and even as the sole operator would have to have some sort of qualification as part of that certification. Is that still something that's required or no?
There is definitely different requirements for different types of activities. When you're getting down to the granular level of which specific activity, like a home baker versus something else, I'd have to defer, come back to you with some more specific information. But for clarity around the MPI example, you're talking about risk. MPI have made the determinations as to what the risk categories are and identified that a home baker fits within a food control plan, which is the same as many other activities. So they've made the determination that there is risk associated with small operators. And as I touched on earlier, from our experience working with small operators versus big operators, you couldn't say one's got less risk than the other. It all comes down to your food hygiene practice, your systems, your processes. And a one-man band could have a really high level of compliance and food hygiene, but equally a large company could have a bad or good. You couldn't put them in a row and go, generally big's better than small or vice versa. It's anywhere.
So are there any categories of home operator, food producer that would not be required to have a food control program, where we see the comments around people selling food through Facebook pages or whatever, and is there a threshold of X number of cakes, or is there a level that people are not required to do this as a home occupied?
Yeah, I'm just looking at some examples because there's obviously a lot of different foods out there. A small jam and chutney manufacturer can be registered as a national program. Early childhood centre can be a national program. Coffee cup can be a national program. Are the best examples I have on hand for you.
So how would we identify those that should be contributing to this through a food control program, but is there any, do any of our costs go towards actually gathering up the people who should be doing food control programs and aren't? Is there a cost attribution to that?
If you register, you'll be identified with what type of registration you should be under. So if you tried to register as the wrong category, you'd be pulled back in line quite easily. So if your question's that's the answer to that. If it's more about people operating without any license, we do enforcement work with that. Particularly, it's very easy. Like it's very hard to commercially sell something and not be in the eyes of the team, particularly online, like we see on Facebook if people start doing home occupations and those sorts of things. So they do engage in that space. And through the revenue split of the 70-30, there is that public good element which the team do use for doing enforcement actions and monitoring enforcement through that process.
So yeah, just around that, the feelings of submitters of some people taking it easy out and not getting targeted with it.
That's acknowledged. We would certainly encourage anybody that's aware of people operating unlawful businesses in that regard to let us know. But we're not aware of it being an issue generally within QLDC district.
And can you give me an idea of how many hours it does take to audit, say, a hotel with multiple kitchens or what?
I can send you the full breakdown. It is online, the breakdown.
Yeah, just that understanding of it. Are many organisations only having 6 hours, or have we got a proportion of users at the other end of the continuum that are actually being charged 16 hours?
No, so I can say for sure, give you confidence that the majority are very, very close to those hours that are specified, and it's not necessary, but within the food category that they're assigned to, small versus big versus hotel, it's more about the systems and processes that are taking place rather than how much food is being put out the door. Really, it's when there's a significant non-compliance that the hours go over for charging. It's normally when you're on site and the officer has seen some food hygiene practices that just really are poor performing. It needs to be dealt with then and there, so they need to stay on site and work with them to pretty much remove the food that could be causing an issue. And then there is always those corrective actions. But one thing I will just touch on to give the panel a better understanding of how the schedules also work. If you're a good performing operator, you can go out to 18 months for your inspections. If you're poor performing, you can go down to 3 months. So a good performer automatically gets the benefit through the way in which the whole system is developed and structured of paying less money. So you pay an annual registration, that's 12 monthly, and then based upon the performance will dictate how regular your actual audits are.
Okay,
so some poor performers who tend to get a bit upset with council costing them a lot is because they're not meeting expectations, and we need to keep auditing them more regularly to ensure food safety.
So based on the submission, so a small cake operator that's doing okay may not be audited 12 monthly, it might be
18 months.
And you've got all that recorded.
That's all standard across the whole country. A lot of the industry practice around the frequency of auditing is a national standard. If you're poor performing, you will go into a shorter duration. If you're high performing, meeting expectations, no corrective actions required, no follow-up, you'll go on to 18 months. But there is a sliding schedule on that based upon the auditor's determination of compliance levels, and there is
that 18 months is the next one.
That's my understanding today.
And the audit response, results go to MBI, do they?
They all go to PI. It's, we've got a very good system which pretty much updates the same day.
So I guess the issue that keeps coming to these presentations, these submission brings is that, yeah, that 6 hour standard charge. You know, there's perhaps a bit of variability for everyone, every inspection, whether it's 4, 5, 6, 7 or 8. But for those smaller operators, the difference between what might be done in 4 hours and what might take 6 hours is a significant change or increase or cost to those operators that are not generating a huge amount of income.
That's in the kitchen. That's correct. What I have said to the individuals who feel that they're on the outside of the spectrum is if they do want to query the length of time something takes, we can provide that information, and we always do. If we feel that it's we've landed at such a short charge that we can consider it on a case by case basis, we haven't needed to do that at this time. We have provided the information and landed where we feel is appropriate.
So if for some reason the inspection was completed and the whole thing was done and dusted in 4 hours and we queried it, there is an avenue for considering a
It's
reduction.
not through the fee schedule, but through reasonable discretion. We always like to consider things on its merits next to any regulatory element that we do. I've had that a couple of times by a very small number of people, and we haven't been in a position where we've needed to use our discretion.
Yeah, and just, yeah, so for some reason, I'm not sure where I got it from, but I thought that audit was only every second year, but it's every year standard. Sometimes
The registrations every year,
yeah,
and then the auditing is 3 months to 18 months.
Yeah. Yeah. The standard is yearly, but if you're not complying, it's less. If you're a good operator, it's
Within reason.
right.
I'd like to get some technical answers for you around the frequency side of it.
Yeah, so I guess the question I might have asked, let's ask it, is there, and you sound like you think it's been considered in the past, whether there's avenue for a carve out for small home operators to have a 4 hour fee, which then increases if it takes longer.
Very difficult. We're talking about possibly, well, from the review of how long everything takes, even the smallest, as an example, could be any very operator, but a home baker, for example, is meeting that same time frame of audit and all the background work and everything else.
And there is a public-private split on those fees as well, obviously 70/30.
That's right.
Yeah, and I can remember you giving exactly the same answers this time last year.
Getting very consistent with, and about, from my recollection, it's been most years for going back a long time for me now. We didn't change the fees. We put the fees up the first time in 3 years last year. Effectively, it was a 16% increase last year, which was a roughly 5% year-on-year increase. We've determined very likely moving forward, we do not want to be doing those larger fee increases 3 monthly or 3 yearly or bi-yearly. So we'd like to be doing small CPI adjustments every year moving forward, which is the same this year. We're not making any changes to our fee schedule. This didn't go out for specific consultation around these have been adjusted. It was just CPI.
I mean, there were some specific comments made about the timings for the various elements of doing an audit, you know, the arranging an appointment, carrying out the inspection, and the paperwork afterwards. I don't know if you've seen those or have any comment on those, but
The very operational level matters. What I can say is we do get independently audited. We are commended on the high level of work and systems and processes that we do have within that team specifically. But always keen to take on feedback and improve anything we can. For us, we want to get inspections done as quickly as possible, ensuring we're meeting the minimum standard or the highest standard of food safety that we can. But yeah, we've got plenty of work on, so we're not taking our time to.
and there is a, I guess, a timesheet system that records hours directly related to each different job.
It is. Yeah, so if you get a fee query around your specific one, we can break that down for you. And even within the charging, the way we have it applied is it breaks it down into travel, pre-inspection, like the categories we use is about half a dozen
specific items we use that we can pull data from.
Okay. Any other questions? No? No? Okay. Done. Right, we must be getting pretty close to the end of our questions. Is there any other items you want to ask questions? No. Right. Thank you both very much. Okay, so I guess the way I'm thinking we do this is we have to go through these individual components, and I haven't got the impression that we're looking to change anything at this stage from what's being proposed. But we need to just go through and check those off. So we've got environmental health, sport and recreation, parking, monetary airport, planning and development, dog registration, and other feedback. Feedback won't have any charges to it. What are you reading from? Oh, this is my little run sheet. Oh. The different categories in the sheet.
I would imagine the sheet.
I think that's in the presentation.
In the slide presentation.
Yeah, that's the.
So actually, I mean, when you look at this,
Yeah.
when we look at the pricing schedule, proposed schedule, we've got different categories: environmental health, community services and facilities, library, transfer station, parking, moorings, Monterey Airport, planning and development, dog registration, trade waste, cemetery, other. So those are all the categories that the schedule lists fees and charges for. Are there any out of those that we are disposed to looking at any changes to, based on what we've heard today and the responses we've had from the staff?
Well, no, it would be good to get, like, for example, on the Wanaka Airport, obviously there's having that clarification from Roger on the parking fees is not for the regular user, it's for the and so there needs to be some, obviously, a bit of communication through the user group to make sure they understand what's going on, I guess. The fees, we heard from the operator that the $3 fee for a small plane of your cars, and it's very hard to spread it across the others, but they've already got large increases. So,
the $3.
but the other thing we need to make in the notes, I don't know how we're going to write this up, but you can stick with the fee, but understand that the system for checking landings versus touch and goes, and that is working appropriately to appease the main submitter, who is a big user there. But I guess we're not looking at changing that fee. The landing fee to get the asphalt alongside the grass fee, having a grass apron to get some standardisation so that people aren't slipping off the asphalt onto the grass, getting a free parking. I think that makes sense. Yeah. So that's the airport one. But I think we need something out of it to be able to explain the reason for sticking with that fee based on what we've heard.
With the grass apron parking fee.
Yeah, and also the landing fees. Oh, the grass apron and the landing fees, with the understanding that what you're actually charged for in a landing fee rather than, you know, if you're not charged for touch and goes. So.
Yeah, but like you say, that perhaps does come back to the user group. Or
yeah, we need to have some words on to explain that back to the user group, so there's a clear understanding of what this was all about.
Catherine may want to speak to this, but she says that there should be a separate resolution to agree to lower dog fees in the late submission.
Well, no, it is an amendment. Yeah. That's correct.
Yeah.
So yeah, so generally back to the one people we're not looking to change the fees, but other than the fees and charges of schedule, there needs to be some communication about how they're applied
Yes,
and managed.
yes.
Clarity around the
That's
license
responding
to
to- that's
occupy
responding-
current users.
That's responding to the submissions we received, so. And otherwise, we're accused of just taking submissions and ignoring them. So I think it was a good response from the staff and from Roger on that.
And the submitter was here when that discussion was held as well.
Yes,
so.
yeah. And I'm sure he's walked away wanting to have a discussion with Roger or someone about how it's all going to pan out. And I'm sure Roger will go and talk to him.
Yeah.
You got the thumbs. Yeah. So
And the other ones that we've just spent a lot of time discussing with dog registration fees, I don't think we're looking to make any changes to that.
Agreeing with Kat on the working bills.
That's in the schedule. That's.
yeah, we agree with that.
Apart from the amendment that we have got about the menacing and dangerous dog, or was it just menacing or just dangerous?
Menacing, it's not-
The 150% rate for that.
But I still believe that, you know, right at early beginning, we maybe need to somehow rather communicate with pictures or something of what the increase is. How what's the reason for the increase? That's in a comment rather than a
For which one?
not for long, but for dogs and things. So we don't get people saying misunderstanding or not understanding why there's an increase.
I think some of those responses in the submission form could help point to what communications.
Yeah, some
Because we can see clearly from submitters where there's been the misunderstanding on our part. Yeah.
and there's some stuff around the cost of waste management, waste services provide the bins for all our waste, including dogs, rather than dog registrations. So all the ratepayers are paying for that.
Actually, I had a note for a question which I've missed my opportunity to ask it now, but I'll make a statement of it. It's that I don't know whether the officer responses to the feedback is directly communicated back to the submitters. If it doesn't happen, it might be worthwhile as well, where there is a direct response. It is. I'm getting some nodding here.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, but looking at the number of people we're talking about here, it's not a large number. So for the whole community, if there's, I'm not trying to create extra work. I'm just saying, if we do some more messaging, that's where we should concentrate on some of the points raised in these submissions.
Okay, I don't know. Yeah, there might be a media release on fees and charges. Maybe that could be covered in there. Getting some more nods in the gallery.
Now, through the chair, last time you did this, you did have separate resolutions on each of the categories, but
I think that was because of one
yes,
proposal to not agree with one of them, but yeah, I guess what I'm trying to get at is we're looking at agreeing these the proposed schedule of prices, fees and charges without amendment other than for the one to do with menacing and dangerous dogs. So unless you've got anything else you want to bring up to look at making a change, I'm going to put that resolution before us. Now's your last chance to propose any changes.
so
I think we've flagged a couple of things that we've acknowledged are going to be addressed through other pieces of work that came out of submissions, things like cemeteries handbook, the parking bylaw, and some submitters around consideration of residence permits and other pieces. But none of those directly affect the fees. Back up my panel's fellow comments around communication pieces. But I'm satisfied that the justification around the methodologies for increase have been evidenced today.
Okay. Happy then. So the resolution, then the recommended resolution, is that the fees and charges hearing panel recommend to council that the fees and charges for all of those categories
for 2025,
for 2025-26 be adopted with the amendment of the category of the price changes for dangerous and menacing dogs set out in staff recommendation. Can we do it as simply as that? Officer recommendation.
Is it dangerous and menacing dogs?
Yes.
Yeah, there was, but they've changed the amount for that.
So that the fees and charges hearing panel recommend to council that fees and charges for 25-26 be adopted without amendment except in relation to fees for dangerous and menacing dogs as detailed in the officer recommendation on the late submission.
Is it, well enough worded to
Through the chair, do any of is that an appropriate response?
just read that again?
That the fees and charges hearing panel recommend to council that the fees and charges for 2025-26 be adopted without amendment except in relation to fees for dangerous and menacing dogs as detailed in the officer recommendation on the late submission.
Okay. Satisfied with that, I'll move that. Wait a second. Thanks, Lisa. All in favour? No, carried. So that brings our meeting to an end at whatever the time is now, 12:17. Thanks everyone for being here and taking part and answering questions. It's all right, is that okay? No, always difficult. Last year. Yeah. Right.